Let's take a look at editcareer.php. Before we do that, I did a quick sketch. This shows the layout of the code. So when we run the page career edit, first thing it does is it shows the form. So here's our form. And you can see it's opened up the database and it's gone and shown each record, shown the title, and it's also added in for each record. It's added in a delete button as well as a radio button for the item. And when you click do it, it's going to check for either the delete button or this radio button and decide which part of the program to run. As the user goes into the form, the first thing it does is open up the database. And then it shows the form. And I'll step through that right in just a minute. Then, depending upon what the user does, the submit flag is set to 2, and that processes the form. Now, in process form, in this function, there's 3 basic parts. It can either delete the record, add a new record, or edit the existing record. So each of those sets the submit flag to a different code. So if the person selected, say, the delete right here, then that will go over and run the delete record, close the database, and go back and display the form. If they want to add a new record, so there isn't an item selected and there's no option to delete, then it sets it to submit flag to option 5, adds in the record with dummy data that the user can change, and then it closes the database and goes back and shows the form. And the final option is the user could select an existing item, so they would click one of these left-hand buttons. That would select the submit flag to 3, update the database, and then close the database and come back here and display the new refreshed data. Now, you may have noticed that there's no submit flag number 1. We go from 0, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is one of the things that happens with code, production code. And you can see here that we have the 5 options. So if we look at option 1 and see what it is, we'll do a Control F for validate form. And you can see it's in the comments and it's in the switch, but that's the only 2 places it is. So whoever wrote this code never wrote the validate form function. They stubbed it in, but then they never fleshed it out. So let's take a look at our code. The web page comes in. All of this happens on the same web page, standard HTML, except when we go into the PHP, the first thing we do is we save the name of this file. Now we're going to use this self variable later on in the form so the form can call itself. That way it's all automatic. The programmer doesn't have to worry about having a hard-coded name in there. The server will automatically keep track of the file name. We're also setting a record set to null, and we're doing that more as a global variable. Now, there's 2 ways we can come into a form. One, if the form has never been seen before, then it will just show the form. We'll just run show form. Otherwise, we're going to go through and see what that submit flag is, and then that number is going to tell us what to do based on this diagram that we just looked at. So here's the submit flag, and depending upon what that submit flag is, that's what's going to be done, and then it's going to go back and redisplay the form. So here's our show form, and you'll notice we got our self, we made it global, our record set, and also our connection. Then we open up the database, which is going to jump down. Now we're going to open and close the database many times in these different functions. So what we did is we wrote a function down at the bottom, and you can say here's our open database, and we set up our variables, and this is kind of nice because it has all our variables in one place, and then we use them inside the code. So when you're maintaining this program, this information has a tendency to change when you change servers. And so it's really easy to update it here and not miss anything. And then we inserted it down in here. Also notice that if something goes wrong, we display the name of the database to give us exactly, tell us what's going wrong in what database. And here's close DBF. Again, we set our global variables. We free our record set and just close the database. So this is just a standard open database. So let's go back up to our show form. And when we're going to show the form, we basically are going to say select all the fields from the page data table where page is career. Remember, this table has two different pages. It can be for career pages or it can be for activities. And for this page, we just want to look at the careers. Again, if something goes wrong, we display the actual SQL statement so we can see it, the SQL statement. And then we build the form. So we say one time we do our H2s, telling the user what to do. And then we build the form, and here's where that self variable comes in. So over here on line 64, we're saying when the user clicks on the submit button, then go back and run this page. It's going to be the post method, so all of the fields in this form are going to be sent in a little suitcase to the server. It's going to open it up and then it can use it. That will be the post database or the post array. Then we set up a table, and here is where we loop through what we got from the record set. So when we opened up the record set here and built it from the database on line 57, then this while loop just goes through each of the rows. So if there's 2 rows or 20 rows or 100 rows, this will keep making new rows displaying our form. So here's, you can see there's 4 rows in this database at this state. And this is just the basic thing. Here's our input. Here's our radio buttons for deletion. And again, you can read the comments and see what each is doing. And then here's our very important hidden field, so we know what value to send back the next time we loop around. Now, we also have add a new entry. If you look on our form, you'll see here's our add a new entry. This isn't in the database. This is the loop in the database, and after it was done looping, then we added on one more row and we hard-coded in the value, add a new entry, and this is our new op choice, and we gave it a value of -1. If you look back at our schematic, you can see here that this is what we're looking for. So if we have a -1, then that goes to add a new item. So this is a second flag that we're setting up so the program knows what to do. Then down here we just close the form, set up our submit buttons. A lot of these non-breaking spaces are just for visual appeal. And then all important, we close the database. Now, when the person clicks on the button, it goes back through here, checks out which flag it is, and we'll just go right through the schematic. So the first flag we show is delete, but we have to process the form. So the first time we come around, the submit flag is 2. We process the form, and we go down here to process form. And this is going to have the 3 pieces. So we have our delete, we have our add new entry, and we have our edit. And these are based on an if statement right here that is summarized right here. We delete it if the option delete value is found. So if somebody clicked on one of these, then this code is going to be true. If they didn't click on one of those delete, but the item is a -1, then it's automatically known they're going to add a new item. So that would be clicking on this. And the final thing is if there is an item and they didn't click on the delete, then we just edit the existing. Now, when you add, let me go back in here, and when you add a new item to that form, you're going to do it here in show form, and you're going to build up that new item in here. For example, maybe you want to add a checkbox that allows the person to either to show or not publish or not publish each item. So that would go right inside this while loop. Keep in mind that you have to also add a field in the database table so you can reflect it in this while loop. All right, so let's go down and we can look at the delete. So now we're handling the form, option 2, and we go in and we figure out it's a delete. So we go in here and we ask, are you sure you want to delete this item? And then we select that from the page and we have the item number. So we got that from the form. So here you can see we got the item number from the suitcase that the form sent us, so we know which option choice it is. So we grab that item number, and that's the record we want to select. So we show that, display all the contents of that field, again, going through a loop, and then we say, are you sure you want to do this? And if they click yes, then we send the value 4 back. So it runs our delete record, and then it comes back and displays it. So let's go back and look at our value 4. That's delete record. So we go from the processing to the delete record, and we get the item number again. We set up our SQL statement, and in this case we made it in 2 lines. So we say delete from page data, the table, where item equals the specific item number. So it's only going to delete the 1. Now, we've just set up our variables here, and then we open up the database, and then we do the deletion. We tell you it was deleted, and then when they click and returns, it goes back and refreshes the page. After it shows the page, don't forget that it also closes the page. So if we go back here to show form, we go back to show form. And here's where it closes the database. So again, our picture is they deleted it, so it runs a delete record, it goes around, closes the database, displays the form, and then closes the database here. So this is a little incorrect because this closed database happens after the form displays. And you should be able to follow the other two. We can add new and we can add existing. Let's just take a look at it really quick. We come up here, and when the code comes to add new, we go to add record. I'll do a quick Control F to find it in my code. Here's my add record. We go in, and from the post, we get all the information from the forms. We store it in our fields. Now, notice how smart the programmer was, is he or she named the fields that match the field names in the table. And then we're going to add a record, so we're going to say insert into the table, and then they called out each of these field names, and then here's the values. So this is in parentheses, and we're hard coding career in because we want this to be only the career pages, and then we put in the fields, the information from the form. Once we have this SQL string built, then we run the SQL and we leave a note to the user that we added the input. And then here's a button just to hold on, and notice our submit flag is back to 0. So we're going to start all over again on the loop. And notice the submit button just says click to continue. Now, one point here is we didn't write this SQL statement all at once. The first thing we did is we did just a hard-coded statement. We said insert into page data, page values, career, and that's the end. And we saved that as an SQL statement. And we ran this hard-coded statement first. Then, one field at a time, we added on header and then hard-coded in the value of header. So we could have gone in here and we could say header test 1. Now, if you can imagine all of this being gone, and this is what we tested first. And you see what we did is we hard-coded this first to make sure our single quotes worked and to make certain this whole SQL statement was valid. Then, once we got that, in fact, usually that's just left there as a comment to show how the SQL looks. Then we slowly added each of these. We had this field and this variable, this field, this variable. And you can see here the single quotes, how we had to set them aside. So these single quotes right here match this single quote, this value, this single quote, and then the comma. Also notice how we lined up everything, so if we made a typo here, we would see it right away. We've already done delete a record, and let's look at new record. Oh, here's our edit record. So again, we say select everything from the career for that item, and then we show the values in our form. So we go through and show, now this is a loop that just shows each field in that row. And the final thing is, here's a new record, and this checks our criteria, and then we come in and we give some shortcuts, but also we filled out, you see how we put in the default values of what's most common. So it's real easy to delete and edit things. It's hard for people to come up with stuff automatically on their own. So when they do a new one, all of this routine information pops up. So that's our form that calls itself, and this is the pattern that it does. And back again, that the main place where you want to change your code is up where you display the form. Now you'll have to also go into these others, so the process form, the update, the delete, because you're going to have one or two new fields in your table that you're going to have to account for in the database when you handle these. But the main part is show form, is that's where you're going to show your form and have all your extra, probably a checkbox over here showing people what to check. Also, this is also the place where you can add more detail. So instead of just adding heading 1, you can add more information under each of these. The form will go a little bit deeper, but it'll sure help the person know which one of these has been edited and what they want to do with it. You also have to go into the database and find out if it's checked or not to know if it's been published or not. So you have to get the information from the table and display in your checkboxes so the user knows if it's published or not published. So there you have editcareer.php.